at 160 miles, and then we'll continue with the rest of our on-orbit operations.
And what are they doing right now? You actually having flown the shuttle before, Bonnie has before us, I don't know whether you can see it, but she has laid out the second-by-second flight plan right now, and you're noting on my line here that ohms tube burn, very important in the sequence.
Well, yes, because it does put us into the proper orbit from which that we are able to stay in orbit instead of being in elliptical orbit, and also the orbit that we plan to deploy the satellite from, the TDRS. So we need this burn. What I have in front of me are copies of the checklists that the crew actually have on board, one being an ascent checklist, and the other is called a crew activity plan, which lays out our activities not only hour by hour, but once we get on orbit, you'll see it lays us out by minute. And this is what we spend up to a year or a year and a half rehearsing before we fly.
Before you ever go to the launch pad?
Absolutely. And
when we were coming out around, what was it, about 5:35 this morning, it was still dark outside, we were making our way in a car to our CNA work spot here, you were pointing out that right now, astronauts are training for missions that will occur in 1990, 91, 92?
Well, we have astronauts in our office following these missions. We work with the customers, we work with experimenters, and even helping to design their hardware. We assign an official crew somewhere between a year and a half, depending on whether or not it's a space lab mission. So you can train 16, 18 months before you actually fly on a specific mission.
And the 5 men on this mission, they all are a very experienced crew.
They've each flown twice. They are members of both the 78 and 80 classes. So I have a couple classmates on that flight.
Which ones?
Well, Dave Hilmers and Mike Lounge are in my class.
Is it unusual for NASA to pack that many heavies, that many experienced pros, and 2-3/5 of these guys represent some of the best combat flying in Vietnam, and thousands of miles flight time behind that stick? Is it unusual?
Well, it's actually a combination of factors. Most of this crew had been put together ever before the accident. They were to fly a different mission. They had a different pilot. He went back to the Air Force. But we have 3 military astronauts on board and 2 civilians. It's a typical mix. I think that there was an effort to try to make sure we had at least a flown person on because of the importance of this mission. But generally what we try to do and have done in the past is to mix the crews, because obviously you have to start someone flying at some point to give them experience, to be experienced. And on my flight, it was my first flight, but with 4 other people.
We will continue our coverage of the flight of the Shuttle Discovery in a moment.
Shaw.
Officially, NASA calls the Shuttle Discovery Space Shuttle Mission STS-26. Well, a short while ago, after STS-26 lifted off from Launch Pad 39B, in launch control, the administrator, the head of NASA, Dr. James Fletcher, addressed his people.
Well, to start with, wow, that was really something. It's been a long wait, 2.5 years or a little bit better than that. You guys have been working your tails off for the last, I don't know how long hours, overtime, fixed all the problems, ready to go. When it's time to go, we went. All I can say is that the nation owes you a lot, and will continue to owe you a lot in the months and years to come. This is the first of a new era, as we've said before. Congratulations for a job well done.
And Dr. Fletcher, no doubt, pleased that he was proved wrong. You might recall, if you were with us early this morning, CNN's John Holloman talked with Jim Fletcher, and he allowed us how he thought that it was a 50-50 chance it could go either way, that it wouldn't go, and he said, and it might not go. And of course it went, and he's bursting with pride. John Zarella is down in the VIP section, and he has a very important guest. John?
That's right, Bernie. With me is Kathleen Beers, and like so many of us, Kathleen was here
2.5 years ago on that very unfortunate day, but Kathleen was here for a very special reason. She was one of the 10 finalists in the Teacher in Space contest, and it must have been an agonizing 2 years and 8 months for you.
It was a long 2.5 years, it really was, and it was almost approaching the 3 years, and it's been a long wait. I feel so exhilarated now. I feel really weightless. I feel like I put in a month's work in when those main engines were lit. I mean, this one's for Challenger. I was just so excited. This is, I feel like I'm floating. This is fantastic.
I imagine it must feel as if a giant weight has been lifted off your shoulders.
You bet. My feet aren't touching the floor and the ground. And I remember several times when Scobie would say in training, when things were like lagging a little bit, and Scobie would say, time to press on, time to press on. And believe me, when they lit those main engines, all I could think of Scobie saying, time to press on. And I thought, go for it. This is for that whole crew. Their mission continues. This put closure to it, because up to that time, the chapter was unwritten. And today we're on our way. It's all been too good. From 1904, Wright Brothers, we grew wings at Kitty Hawk, and we put footprints on the moon, and Skylab and Space Lab and the shuttle missions. And we can't. There's no going back. We've got to go out there for the 21st century and explore and discover. And I'm just so glad we're back on track.
Well, your eyes were glued to the launch pad. I know some of us didn't want to watch it.
They were glued. I was crying. Oh, it was just fantastic.
What's next now for you?
I hope to be on it. I really do. In fact, someone said at the hotel this morning, what will you be thinking 5 seconds before liftoff? And I said, Godspeed, and I wish I were on it.
And you have no reservations of flying on the space shuttle?
None at all. Absolutely none. Pioneering is a special privilege, and there are things in life that are worth the discovery, the exploration, that transcend the risk and the danger.
You're a school teacher, 10th, 11th, 12th graders. What do you say to those many school children who watched 2 years and 8 months ago and now watched again?
Things are fine. It's fixed. Problems arise, and the space system will always be state-of-the-art and on the edge of technology, and nothing is completely safe, and they need to realize that now. We haven't built the safe car yet. I had a month after the tragedy, I had a hairdryer that was recalled. So when you think of those things, we need the sense of to proceed on. There is a sense of element, a sense of danger, and if it weren't for really the vision of Columbus and those people on Westward Ho, we wouldn't be standing right here if they would have calculated and thought out, well, it won't work because, in fact, one of the things that really gave me strength when Dick Rutan and Gina Yeager came back from Voyager, they had shared a tribute with me that I read to all the audiences, and to have a dream and follow that dream and go for it. And because so many times I've done a lot of mountain climbing and sailed transatlantic, and people will say it's dangerous or why do you do it, and you just have to follow that dream and go for it. And it's for I want to make sure when I'm gone, I want to feel like I've left Earth a better place, that I just didn't journey through, that there was an imprint and I made a difference.
And obviously the dream now continues. Back to you, Bernie.
Thank you very much, John. And Bonnie Dunbar, what a difference 29 minutes can make. While we were listening to John's interview, Bonnie said it's good they got off because the bad stuff is closing in. You can see how gray it's gotten behind us. What a difference, 29 minutes, and it's almost dark here at the Cape.
Yes, we do have some weather moving in that probably would have affected the launch. I think it was a good time and everything worked well.
This is this formation that Valerie Voss had pointed out to us about 2 hours ago. It was off the coast, and she indicated, the radar indicated that it was moving closer, and my goodness, it's right on top of us. Well, they continue on their mission. The Discovery astronauts, the Discovery 5. Jeff Levine is off the reservation. You know, the Kennedy Space Center is a natural wildlife preserve. I even saw an eagle's nest, and there are many other forms of wildlife. But once you get off the Kennedy Space Center and go over to a small community called Titusville, you find that the roads to Titusville at this moment are still clogged, and people in Titusville proper are still talking about the fact that Discovery is up. Jeff?
Bernie, there was indeed some wildlife over here. The crowds were thrilled to see the launch go so perfectly. Among them, Mr. Dennis Bound from Sheffield, England. Dennis, the overseas perspective, your reaction.
Well, I should think it was great, you know, I'm really marvelous.
What did you think when you saw it go up?
Well, I'm really excited, you know. It seemed incredible there could be men in that thing, you know.
Why did you come to watch? What was the special reason?
It's an experience, isn't it? It's an experience. And after the tragedy 3 years ago, you know, anything could have happened today, you know.
You camped overnight. You brought some
No, we've been here 2 days. We waited 2 days for the event. We thought it to be, you know, not much room, so we thought we'd come early, you know.
Was it worth it?
I think so, yeah. I think it was great.
Was this the first one you'd seen?
Yeah, yes. My friend's seen 3. He saw the tragedy and the one before and this one, but this is the first I've ever seen. And it was worth coming for.
Is there anything like it overseas, or is this unique to America?
No, I don't think so. The Russians have got something similar, I believe, but England's not bothered just yet.
But today seems to be our day. Dennis Brown,
it's your day,
thank you for joining us.
Yeah.
Bernie, back to you.
Well, just as this is the first time for Dennis, so it is the first time for this reporter, and I'll never forget, literally, the earth shaking. CNN will continue its live coverage of Discovery. They are successfully off. They're heading for orbit. In about 6 hours, they deploy that satellite, the Tidris. We'll continue our coverage as we look at the liftoff here some 29-30 minutes ago. We'll be right back with more of the flight of Discovery.
Americans return to space as Discovery clears the tower.
Roger, roll, Discovery.
Crew confirms roll program. Houston now controlling.
Oh, you know, Jackie Gleason loved Florida. He spent so many years down here, especially in the wintertime, and I can't help feeling, were he alive, he would have to say, because of what's happened with Discovery, how sweet it is. We want to maintain the overview of this mission, so let's go to Tony Clark in Houston at Mission Control. Tony?
Bernie, I was just thinking what you said, and also the interview John Zarella had with one of the former Teacher in Space finalists. She was saying at the time that Dick Scobie, the commander of the Shuttle Challenger, used to say, press on, press on. And June Scobie, we talked to her a while back, and I asked her what she'd be thinking when the Discovery was launching, and she said she'd be thinking what Dick Scobie would be thinking if he were there. He would always say, go, baby, go. And I think that was the feeling we had here. I mean, there were people all around the Johnson Space Center who, as it was lifting off, were saying, go, baby, go. And the cheers that went up here and in Mission Control, it was an exciting thing. And just watching the opening, it's exciting to watch the launch again and again. Now we come down to the meaning of this, the 4-day mission that the shuttle crew is on. The crew has planned 4 days, a conservative mission, a mission aimed at not only launching the Tidris satellite and doing a dozen experiments, but it is also a mission aimed at checking the shuttle out as well.
There have been scores of changes to the shuttle and the solid rocket boosters since the Challenger explosion 2.5 years ago. And though there have been repeated checks of the new designs, it is the launch itself which will be the ultimate shakedown test. The first few minutes are crucial.
We're not doing much, but we are concentrating on watching what's happening. Because if something does happen that shouldn't happen, we have to be ready to cope with it.
I don't think there's anybody in our office that has ever flown on the space shuttle that didn't realize that the first 2 minutes of flight are the most hazardous of the entire mission because of the requirement that the solid rocket boosters work the way they're designed. So, sure, we get to 2 minutes into flight and the solid rocket motors come off, then the first flight test objective is complete.
Once in orbit, the 5 crew members, all veterans of previous space flights, will begin preparations to deploy the 5,000-pound tracking and data relay satellite called Tidris. The satellite will be released from the shuttle's payload bay just 6 hours into the mission. Later, a 2-stage solid rocket will boost the satellite to an orbit 22,000 miles high. From there, it can relay millions of bits of information from shuttles and satellites to ground tracking stations. One Tidris satellite is already in orbit. A second was destroyed with a Challenger. Eventually, NASA plans to have 3 Tidris satellites orbiting the Earth, allowing them to have communication with the shuttle throughout most of its orbits. Right now, Mission Control periodically loses contact with the shuttle when it goes out of range of ground tracking stations or the one Tidris satellite. Once the satellite is deployed, the crew will turn its attention to nearly a dozen scientific experiments, including one designed to help AIDS research. It involves growing tiny crystals, which, because of the microgravity of space, grow in a way that makes it easier for researchers to determine the shape of the crystal's molecules.
Then once they know the shape of these molecules, they can design another molecule, a drug, that fits in, locks in, and either enhances the action of this or disables it. In the case of this AIDS enzyme that we're carrying, that disables the enzyme that keeps the virus from reproducing.
There were also experiments proposed by students, including one to test the strength of certain metals in weightless conditions. Once the experiments are underway, there's time for one of the fun parts of the mission, looking out the window.
One of the best places is in the front window, not for taking pictures, but just for being a tourist, because we fly around upside down most of the time, nose forward. So you just get in the front windows there and kind of lay on the ledge like a lookout and just watch the horizon come toward you.
Mike Lounge, Dick Covey, Rick Houck, Dave Hilmers, and Pinky Nelson have been preparing for this flight for 2 years. They are eager to get the mission underway.
You've invested so much, and so many pieces have had to come together to get you there where you are, say, on your back a couple minutes before launch. Mostly you're praying and hoping that nothing goes wrong to screw it up.
One of the things that some of the first shuttle tests have occurred already, those first parts of the shakedown test, the SRBs appeared to work well on the launch. And one of the things that's going to happen now, we saw the SRBs, the solid rocket boosters, fall off as the shuttle climbed towards orbit. Now NASA will recover those solid rocket boosters and they will take a look at them. They will take them apart and they will examine them just to make sure that they work the way that they were supposed to work. And the goal there is to make sure not only that this was a safe flight, but that future shuttle flights are just as safe. Another thing that appeared to have worked well is the line of communications. As John Holloman reported earlier this morning, he said one of the things the Rogers Commission in investigating the Challenger disaster came up with was the need for better communication all up and down the lines of NASA, so that if someone, an engineer, anyone had a concern about the possibilities that something might happen to the shuttle, that information would get to the proper people. We heard right before launch a various checklist, everyone saying it's okay to launch, going up and down, opening the lines of communication. So another portion of this shuttle mission appears to be headed in the right direction, and we'll be following the shuttle mission throughout its 4 days. I'm Tony Clark, CNN, reporting live from the Johnson Space Center.
Tony, the world, of course, is watching the Discovery 5 up there aboard the shuttle, the orbiter. But what about the other 5? What about the other people so important to NASA, to Discovery, and to the 5 men on board? What about the wives? Yesterday, in a very rare interview, correspondent Jeff Levine sat down and talked with 2 of the wives. Let's listen in.
I think the logical place to begin is what I'm thinking of. This is not a low-pressure enterprise. Obviously, the emotions are cooking. How do you cope?
You cope minute to minute. Just kind of handle each morning and then the afternoon, and don't look too far ahead, and just kind of move along. If you look too far ahead or spend too much time thinking about it, you tend to get rather anxious, and it's a little bit easier just to keep lots of friends and family and activity around you, and time passes pretty quickly that way.
Is this, in a sense, like being a policeman's wife or a fireman's wife? This is a factor in the equation of your marriage. You have to live with it.
I've often compared it to that. We're no different than a lot of other spouses whose husbands have a high-risk job. They accept it, and you live with it, and that's the way.
It's them. It's just part of
it's a part of them, and you accept that.
I suppose, though, that what happened to Challenger has to color your thinking about this mission to some degree. You're only human. You can't expunge it from your consciousness totally. Does it drift in and out, this nightmare?
Oh, yeah. I don't think there's any doubt. It would be foolish of us not to look at that every now and then and examine it and examine the feelings that you have about it. That was a terrible loss to the nation, but to each of us personally, because they were close friends. I mean, aside from the fact that they were astronauts and whatever they were doing, it was like losing a close friend, but losing several at the same time, and that was very, very devastating for all of us. It's like anything else. When you are faced with the stark reality of it and you have to face it, then you do. It's easy to kind of, I think for Covey's last flight, I really didn't allow myself any time to think about those sort of possibilities. That just wasn't something that could happen.
Is that the way you deal with it?
I did last time. I really didn't worry about that. I was not so very different from most of the nation. And that was just not something. It's like I don't worry about getting in my car in the morning and that I'm going to have an accident. I just don't worry about that. I assume that can't happen to me. And I assumed the same thing with Covey shuttle flight and with every shuttle flight that came along. That the Challenger accident stopped the privilege of being able to be quite so naive about it. And yeah, you do have to grow up a little bit and say, okay, now let's face the facts. These things can happen, and if they do, there's not a lot of control that I have over it, and there's not a lot of reason for me to worry and fret and stew, because it's not going to change the course of events. They're going to unfold the way they'll unfold.
After the Challenger, Mike and I talked quite a lot, but one of the things that he said that really surprised me was, you know, of the two jobs, you have the tougher job. And it surprised me because I had never heard it verbalized. But the fun part, the execution of it, I mean, he's busy. He doesn't have to worry about all the various and sundry things at home and the bearing up of all the people, all of the family. We are the people who are left here with the family, with the children, and we're the people who have to carry on. And very much so, that's true.
In terms of explaining things to children, is there a simple or relatively easy way of doing that, or do answers lead to more questions?
There's never a simple way to explain to a child.
I think every child handles it differently. I think after the Challenger accident, watching the way my children handled it versus the way other children handled it, it was an interesting, I mean, I thought that we would be able to sit down and discuss this in kind of the same fashion, and with my children it was not their fear or their amazement at it all had very little to do with the fact that these were astronauts that had been killed. They were amazed that a dad could die. That wasn't the normal event of things. They didn't really do much connection between the fact that those parents were doing for a living the same thing that Covey did for a living. That was not part of the equation at all. It was more of dealing with the fact that we all are mortal, and at some point it may end, and we don't have any control over that date or time.
To what extent is it possible to keep NASA out of family affairs? Can you have a family life amidst the hoopla and the work? The workload's got to be fantastic.
We are absolutely normal people. We have absolutely normal family lives, and until I
speak for yourself.
when I left Houston the first of this week.
Was he an engineer too?
Well, fairly much so. I mean, we're just like any other two-person working couple, and Kathy and Covey are the same way. We juggle household and children and make things work, but we're fairly normal.
I'm still waiting for normal to come back. It was somewhere when I was 20, and I'm expecting it again at 60. I don't know.
We have
I gave it up in between.
We all have our moments when it becomes. I mean, you do a juggling act. Any professional couple or any couple where both of you work do a juggling act. And Mike and I have always compared it to juggling until you drop a ball, and then everything stops. You pick it all up and you put it all back together again. But you make it work through effort and through teamwork.
So it's a special life. Is it not, Kitty?
It is, and part of it is knowing that that you're helping make history and you're helping mold the direction that the space program will go. That's part of their job.
Is that the special aspect of Discovery? This is an historic mission. No one can quarrel with that. This is your place.
Oh yes, this is the place to be right now in space history. We are going to make it work.
No, I think that I know when Covey came home or called me to tell me that he'd been selected for this flight, it was, he was probably standing on his desk, jumping up and down. He was absolutely ecstatic about the opportunity that was being afforded him. And I remember asking him at the time, are you a little nervous about this? Well, that was not even part of the equation at all. I mean, this was, I'm having an opportunity to start things back on right track, get things going again, and I wouldn't miss it for the world.
And we're certainly glad that Kathy Covey and Kitty, Mike Lounge's wife, took time out yesterday on the eve of this historic launch to sit down and talk with CNN. Interesting listening to them. Indeed, strength up there in the heavens and strength down here represented in these women as they carry on. Incidentally, in the early 1970s, Mike Lounge flew combat missions over Southeast Asia. He was flying a big F-14 Phantom jet off the flight deck of the Carey Enterprise, but Lounge is now aboard a much different flying machine on a more peaceful mission. 42 years old, married, 2 children, astronaut since 1981, with 170 hours in space. Mike Lounge, a graduate of the Naval Academy, is a Vietnam War veteran with 99 combat missions as a Navy pilot. He has degrees in physics, mathematics, and astrogeophysics. The upcoming mission will not be Mike Lounge's first aboard Discovery. He flew on the orbiter's most recent voyage in August and September of 1985. Earlier this year, Lounge was asked by CNN's John Zarella about safety precautions for the upcoming flight.
It'll be as safe as we can make it, reasonably. What's the saying about ships? They're safe in the harbor, but that's not what they're for. So, yeah, it's as safe as we can reasonably make it, and the agency management from Admiral Truly on down has said we won't fly until we're sure we're ready to fly. And we've taken all reasonable precautions fixing the known problems. We'll do that and get on with it. If you ride it once, you know it's not routine.
Asked what it's like to sit in a spacecraft and wait for blastoff, Lounge said, "You really get launchitis once you get strapped in. You really want to do it." Mike Lounge, mission specialist on the Discovery flight, is from Burlington, Colorado. Well, they really wanted to do it. They are doing it at this hour, at this second. When that beautiful orbiter lifted off, my colleague here, Bonnie Dunbar, was jumping up and down in the chair watching it. I had a pair of binoculars, and I almost fell off the back of this riser body following it up until a cloud came overhead, and we had to stop and go to the cameras. But there was another reaction. NASA workers and also news media representatives, people from around the world, some 4,000 of them, they had their own reaction. Let's see what it was like.
Discovery's 3-man engines on full power. A beautiful liftoff.
Discovery streaking into space aboard a column of flame.
It's great to be back in space again.
It's very exciting. That's what I think. Just tremendous.
I have the feeling everybody in America felt this was important. The country cares, I think, a lot.
And to see this thing to go flawlessly, man, it is just super.
This was the best one. And I remember several times when Scobie would say in training, when things were like lagging a little bit, and Scobie would say, time to press on, time to press on. And
They're pressing on in space. Bonnie, your thoughts?
Well, I think that it's a rare privilege to have the opportunity to fly it, but the fact that we launched today is a tribute to all of those men and women, engineers, scientists, technicians, secretarial support that helped make it fly. And I think they can all take a great deal of pride in what happened today.
And I personally thank you on behalf of everybody for helping us bring this worldwide audience the coverage of this historic launch. For Bonnie Dunbar, I'm Bernard Shaw, and for everybody here at CNN in Florida, in Houston, in Atlanta, we thank you. Goodbye from the Kennedy Space Center. In Florida, Discovery is still going.
10, we're go for main engine start. 7, 6, have main engine start. 3, 2, 1, 0, and liftoff. Liftoff. Americans return to space as Discovery clears the tower.
Roger, roll, Discovery.
Crew confirms roll program. Houston now controlling. 3 engines at 104%.
Have main engine start. 3, 2.
After 2.5 years on hold,
NASA said could fly twice a month.
Clear. Everything is nominal for ASC.
The shuttle would carry satellites into orbit at a fraction of the cost of rocket launches. NASA had to make these commitments in order to get the shuttle program funded at a time when money was tight and space was not a priority. The agency tried, but the shuttle just couldn't keep pace, not even with 4 orbiters. It was too complicated and delicate a vehicle to fly that often. Landing at the Cape with unpredictable winds and a suspect braking system was dangerous, and the cost of putting a satellite into orbit went through the roof, nearly $7,000 a pound. Challenger was the deadly reaffirmation of a space policy gone awry.
I think we were getting complacent. You know, it's easy with success to get complacent.
In 1987, the Soviet Union launched nearly 100 rockets. The United States managed 8. Many payloads, both military and scientific, scheduled to fly on the shuttle would have to wait. Of the first 9 resumed shuttle flights, 4 are secret Department of Defense missions.
You're going to see that once we work the backlog off in the next couple of years, then I think you'll see primarily the Department of Defense flights, primarily on expendable launch vehicles.
Taking a back seat to the military does not sit well with the science community, but most are realistic.
I hate to say it, but I suspect that the space program might never have even been funded at all if it didn't have the military need pressing in there along with scientific curiosity.
If all now goes well with the shuttle, 2 major planetary missions will fly next year. The Magellan probe to map the planet Venus, and Galileo to survey Jupiter and its moons. The Hubble Space Telescope was supposed to fly in 1986. It won't fly until 1990. When it flies, Hubble will reveal never-before-seen views of the universe. NASA is banking on 3 orbiters to get the job done. NASA won't get its 4th shuttle until 1992. Between now and then, there are 28 missions scheduled. And Columbia, the oldest of the fleet, is undergoing major modifications and may not be ready for its scheduled flight next July.
Right now, we think we can do it. If we find that we can't, then we'll change the schedule. We will not change the processing procedure.
Long range, the outlook is brighter with a mixed fleet, using the shuttle when man is necessary and expendable rockets when he is not. The big question mark is the space station. It will take at least 19 shuttle flights between 1995 and 1998 to bring up and assemble the sections of the station. Many space experts believe that's at least as much stress on the system as that which led to the Challenger accident. John Zarella, CNN.